There are few characters in South Park who make me laugh more consistently than Ike Brovflovski. Sure, he isn't utilized all that frequently, but for me, the novelty of hearing an actual child deliver South Park dialogue absolutely never gets old. But Ike's role in the show has grown and evolved over the years, going from more of a plot device for Kyle stories and developing into a character who actually has a surprising amount going on beneath the surface. And all the while, he has been hilarious. So join me as we explore the evolution of Ike Brovflovski.
Why do you keep harassing me?
Don't kill the baby.
Amazingly, Ike's first episode where he's front and center is the pilot episode of the entire show. Cartman gets an anal probe. In fact, he's the very first character outside of the main four boys to make an appearance in all of South Park. Pretty amazing. It also immediately introduces one of the most iconic classic South Park bits.
Ready, Ike? Kick the baby!
Don't kill the baby.
Kick the baby!
But this is a perfect example of how Ike was used for years as a means to motivate Kyle in South Park stories, as he's abducted by aliens, or taken by visitors as they call them. Kyle has this big end of the episode speech where he pleads the visitors to give Ike back, before Ike eventually just jumps from the spaceship.
Boy, am I glad to see you, Ike.
Oh, she's flying at the sky.
So immediately in South Park, Ike was being absolutely adorable and used as a major plot device for Kyle's journeys. And this was mostly how they continued to use him for the show for a very long time, though occasionally utilizing him for silly ending beats like in Mecha Streisand.
Look!
But the next time they really give Ike focus was season 2's episode Ike's Wee Wee, which uses Ike in a super similar way as the pilot. The episode has them celebrating Ike's bris, but when Kyle realizes what a bris actually is, he tries to save Ike from the procedure by putting him on a train that takes him far from South Park. But what works most about this episode is that this is when Kyle learns that Ike is adopted, which initially just makes him angry that he ever cared about Ike since they aren't blood related. It really does make Kyle look like an asshole.
No way, there's no real connection between us.
But man, these beats where Ike tries to win Kyle back over hit hard. Some of the sweetest, most heartfelt in the series.
Cookie Monster. 2, 3, 4, 5.
Eventually, Kyle realizes his mistake and continues to try and protect Ike from the bris. In Jubilee, we actually start to see hints of how smart and talented Ike actually is. He really doesn't want to be in the Squirts group at Jew Scouts, and so he makes this gorgeous rendition of The Last Supper out of macaroni, seemingly trying to get kicked out of the class.
You don't make a macaroni picture of the Last Supper at a Jewish camp?
Kyle and Ike's dynamic continued into the South Park movie. Kyle is still kicking the baby, but also Ike is hanging around with the boys and even sees the Terrence and Phillip movie with them, picking up some awful language along the way. But once Kyle's mom starts the full-on war with Canada, they start putting Canadians in concentration camps, and so Kyle has to hide his own brother in their attic. This harmonica gag is funny, but also more hints that he's got a lot of hidden talents. This movie really makes Sheila look awful. Kyle's pleading at the end of the movie really should have knocked some sense into her.
Did you forget that your own adopted son is Canadian?
The show would continue to give us cute Ike moments in the early seasons. These songs are particularly funny, like when he's trying out for the gang's boy band. Or when he sang Yankee Doodle Boy for the talent show, which is funny since he's Canadian. But like I said, Ike and Kyle's dynamic continued throughout South Park. So many episodes revolve around Kyle's relationship with Ike, even in episodes that have little to do with him, like Cartoon Wars. Kyle is motivated by his love for his brother, this time having a dream where he's killed in a terrorist attack. This is a strong through line in the show that they were really smart to maintain. However, as the show has evolved, so has Ike, and though his relationship with Kyle has held strong, Ike himself has developed into someone with a lot more depth.
Baby.
One of the first episodes that started to hint that there's more going on with Ike was Trapper Keeper. I had seen this episode many times, but this was the first time it really registered with me that Ike was only supposed to be 3 years old in this one.
But isn't he only 3 years old? Yeah, but he's some kind of genius, so he's getting advanced placement in kindergarten.
I pooped my pants.
This was still when the show was mostly using nonsensical dialogue for Ike that didn't really have any real correlation to the conversations at hand, which makes the episode's story very funny, as he gets nominated for class president against Fillmore, giving a rousing speech for his candidacy.
Cookie Monster. Ice.
Well, this is gonna be a tough one, kids.
Though this episode does mostly make a joke out of Ike's incoherence, it does establish that Ike is seen as having some level of above average intelligence, which is definitely confirmed moving forward. Though the next episode that really focuses on him is pretty rough. At a certain point, Ike starts having a secret affair with his kindergarten teacher, Miss Stevenson.
I do admire you. You are so smart and gifted, so mature for your age.
I don't like medicine.
But after Kyle catches them in the act and tries to do the right thing and remove him from the situation, Ike doesn't want to go. This is another great Kyle trying to protect his brother episode because he has to do what's best for Ike, even though Ike doesn't want it. And Ike is so mad at Kyle when he tries to tell his parents about what's happening. Ike's angry face here is so funny.
Ike and Miss Stevenson are having
Spider-Man!
Yes, Ike, you like Spider-Man, don't you?
And though they are obviously still using mostly nonsensical dialogue for Ike, this definitely shows that he does have a higher degree of comprehension about what's going on than you might expect, as he continues to interrupt Kyle so he doesn't squeal and even argues with him later.
No, Ike, I'm supposed to be looking out for what?
This episode is a whirlwind. Miss Stevenson nearly kidnaps Ike by attempting to flee the country.
I think we should go to Milan, like we always talked about.
Yay! Mulan!
They're eventually caught by the police with no escape, and luckily at the last second Ike comes to his senses, running back to Kyle instead of off of the building with Miss Stevenson. And though this is an episode about a child being taken advantage of, it does really start to show how cognizant of some of these situations that Ike really is. And this next major episode about last night would further confirm this. After Obama wins the 2008 election, Ike appears to be devastated.
He was a McCain supporter. It's okay, Ike. Obama will do fine.
He ends up jumping out of a window as the town devolves into post-election chaos. Kyle and Stan spend the entire night trying to get him to the hospital, all while Obama and McCain secretly undergo their White House heist, the entire reason they ran for office in the first place. After Ike gets to the hospital, it's revealed that the entire time he was part of that heist, making sure that all involved are marked as deceased in their medical records.
Boom, baby!
Smart kid. Probably the smartest thing we'd ever seen him do up to that point, but not the last smart thing. In Fatbeard, Ike would flee the country to become a pirate with Cartman and some other students. This is partially Kyle's fault, who egged Cartman on with his pirate idea. And while the idea of becoming a real-life pirate for fun might be childish, Ike's goodbye letter shows once again that there's a lot more going on inside his head.
Dear Mommy and Daddy, I am running away. I am sorry, but I can no longer handle the monotony of middle-class life.
But eventually, Ike learns that people don't just turn to piracy for fun. They do it because they don't feel they have another choice, and that it's a dangerous life that nobody should want.
Oh my god.
Geez, guess we kinda got put in our place, huh, Ike?
I feel like an asshole.
It's just another great example of Ike having the ability to really understand the severity of a situation despite his very young age. But Ike has to deal with some genuine horrors as well. He's walked in on his parents having sex like 3 separate times, one of which Gerald was dressed up as the UPS man, so Ike actually thought his mom was having an affair.
Ike, this is a big deal. You have to be absolutely 100%.
I saw them, Kyle! I saw them!
Plus, we know he's actually taken LSD, which is definitely not great for a developing brain.
Maybe I'll take just half a hit of acid.
I want free!
He also got hooked on vapes, along with all the other kindergartners.
Ike, do you have a vaping pen?
Nope.
But one of the roughest times in Ike's life was definitely when he got sixth sensed and started seeing dead celebrities everywhere, something his parents refused to believe was even happening to him. This is another great Kyle protecting Ike episode, and you can really see how much Ike trusts Kyle here.
Make him stop! Make him stop, Kyle!
This has got to be one of, if not the most traumatizing episode for Ike. He has to see a psychiatrist to reveal his dead celebrity secret, then some awful ghost hunters come to help and end up pissing all over the floor, and then his ghost visions end up sending him into a coma, trapping him in purgatory with the celebrities who are all still waiting to cross over to the other side. They're all stuck because Michael Jackson refuses to pass on, and he ends up inhabiting Ike's body.
Wee, I'm a child. I knew I was a child, see? Come on, let's play.
This is another example of Kyle going to great lengths to help his brother. In order to help MJ pass on and get Ike back, they help him win a child beauty pageant. MJ is freed and Ike returns to his body.
Holy s***. What the f*** am I wearing?
Ike's life hasn't necessarily been easy. He's gone through a handful of wildly traumatic events, and his home life hasn't exactly been stable. And because of this, Ike did develop some pretty negative tendencies at certain points.
Called you a pussy.
In season 18, Ike, along with all the other kids his age, start to get hooked on watching YouTube streamers like PewDiePie. Where Kyle previously had gotten to spend real bonding time with Ike playing games like Call of Duty, now Ike would rather watch internet creators play instead of play it himself.
You wanna go downstairs and play?
Meh.
This episode has more to do with Kyle coming to terms with the fact that younger generations are going to like new and different things than he does, even if he doesn't understand them. But we also see Ike starting to spend a lot more time on the internet and on his computer, which leads pretty firmly into his major arc in season 20. Gerald starts anonymously trolling people in South Park under the username SkankHunt42, and it sends the entire town into chaos. But when Sheila wants Gerald to talk to Ike about internet trolling because of what's been going on, he sort of just ends up bragging about it.
He's now putting penises in people's mouths all over the internet, and he's actually getting pretty famous.
Gerald continues to brag to Ike about his internet exploits, and eventually, under the pressure of potentially being caught, Gerald starts lashing out at Ike as well.
Do you know who I am, Ike?
No, but I want to, Dad.
Not like that, smartass!
And not only does he lash out at Ike, but Kyle too, which obviously makes an impression on Ike.
Stop being such a pussy, okay, pal?
Daddy called you a pussy.
And even worse, eventually Gerald makes Ike troll for him to get himself out of trouble, forcing him to say some heinous stuff. And when Sheila hears this, she assumes Ike has been the one trolling the entire time, and Gerald then makes him take the blame.
You have to say, I'm sorry, Dad, I guess I'm just fucked up inside.
I'm sorry, Dad. I'm just fucked up inside.
Eventually, Kyle and Ike have to try and troll the president out of bombing Denmark so they can save their dad, despite everything he's done. And we can really see how much Gerald is impressed on Ike here.
You're a little dipshit, President.
With a dirty asshole.
With a dirty asshole.
And you set out your dick.
This is such a unique situation because Kyle and Ike know that Gerald is the troll, but they can't tell their mom, so they basically have to simultaneously take the blame and defy her. But I love this moment when Kyle saves Ike from Sheila's wrath.
I'm sorry, Mom. I'm just trying to protect my family.
Somehow, Gerald is let entirely off the hook for this, and it's hard to imagine that Ike or Kyle's relationship with him will ever quite be the same. There's actually one other instance where Ike was sort of a huge dick, but it actually wasn't quite his fault, but this seems like the right place to talk about it. In the episode Taming Strange, Ike starts going through puberty, and it completely changes just about everything about him.
Get out of my room, Kyle! I'm on my computer!
Ike basically acts like a brooding teenager the entire time, shifting between the childish things he loves and wanting to tame some strange.
Who would you rather Fufa or Tootie? What?
This is another episode where Ike does some pretty horrendous stuff, and he's particularly mean to Kyle, but honestly, you can still kind of see the Ike we know and love below the surface.
Get out of my room, Kyle! I'm playing trucks!
Luckily, they learn that the only reason that Ike is acting this way is because he accidentally was taking Tom Brady's hormones instead of his own daily laxative, a mistake caused by the Canadian government using the IntelliLink system. After he stops taking the hormones, Ike goes back to normal.
It's Dora the Explorer.
Well, mostly back to normal.
I bet he's got that hot Puerto Rican strange.
Like most characters in South Park, Ike has had his ups and downs, though there is one very important aspect of Ike we haven't talked about yet. Obviously, early on in the show, it's established that Ike is a native Canadian adopted by the Brovflovskis, but it isn't until later that they really start to put an emphasis on Ike's Canadian heritage through Ike himself. This really started in the season 7 episode, It's Christmas in Canada, when Ike's birth parents returned to take him back to Canada, made possible because of a new law passed by the Canadian Prime Minister. Ike doesn't want to leave, but they coerce him.
No.
I have some chocolate.
Chocolate!
This is another of the best episodes that shows the lengths Kyle would go for his brother. He and the boys travel all across Canada to try and get Ike back, eventually discovering that the new Canadian Prime Minister is actually Saddam Hussein. Once he's ousted, the laws are nullified, and Ike is allowed to return home.
Would you like to go back to your home in Colorado?
Though this episode establishes that Ike loves his family and his life in America, this was the first time Ike ever spent in Canada, and after this, he would be shown to have strong, genuine Canadian pride throughout the series. The episode Royal Pudding is one of the best examples of Ike's Canadian pride. Ike doesn't show up to school because he's caught up watching the Canadian royal wedding, but during the ceremony, the Canadian princess is kidnapped. After this happens, Ike is basically inconsolable. He's totally unable to perform his role in the school play, much to Mr. Mackey's dismay, but eventually he's instructed by the Canadian Prime Minister to open his box of faith, something that all Canadians have, and follow its instructions. It's basically a call to arms, to go to Canada and help rescue the royal family member in peril. Of course, Ike's Canadian pride leads him forward.
Where are you going?
I got to get to Canada and join the armies and save the princess.
God, Ike is just the best, isn't he? Ike travels all around Canada, teaming up with Ugly Bob, Patuk-Tuk, and Scott, who is a dick.
Stop being a dick, Scott!
Eventually, the quartet discovers the princess has been captured by the evil Tooth Decay, and Ike bravely removes Ugly Bob's paper bag, turning Tooth Decay to stone and saving the princess. Ike and his compatriots are literally knighted by the royal princess.
The princess now knighting Sir Ike Brovflovski, giving him 3 kisses and a pair of socks, as is tradition.
Ike's royal loyalty runs strong. We even see later how devastated he is at the loss of the Canadian queen.
She's dead, Kyle.
Ike, the queen died like 4 months ago.
But we also see that Ike's Canadian pride doesn't just stem from the royal family. Ike fiercely defends his country after it's heinously attacked as well. After Kyle starts to feel bad for the people being farted on by Terrence and Phillip's new Netflix series, he starts a group called Millennials Against Canada to try and put an end to it. A very Sheila-esque move, huh? This leads Canada's Prime Minister of Streaming to meet with President Garrison and complain about the Millennials, which leads Garrison to preemptively nuke Toronto. This is obviously a double affront for Ike, who not only has to learn about the bombing of Toronto, but that his own brother is partially responsible for it.
You know, those shows can be really harmful.
Oh, stop being a victim. Jesus Christ.
After this nuclear bombing, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calls on Canadians to bring Garrison to justice, and Ike heeds the call. Dons full Mountie gear, rides a Newfoundland, and heads into the forest to find the president, possibly the most Canadian thing he's ever done. Ike captures Garrison in a trap and drags him back into town. Though Garrison escapes, it's clear not only how far Ike is willing to go to defend his native country, but how capable he is in doing so. And that's one of my favorite things about Ike. Though on the outside, he just seems like the most adorable little kid in South Park, in reality, he's got so much more going on. He's far smarter than most kids his age, going into kindergarten 2 years early. He helped perform a masterful heist with 2 presidential candidates. He's dabbled in hard drugs and taken a part in very successful piracy. He was haunted and traumatized by the souls of countless dead celebrities. He's shockingly talented at internet trolling, and of course, he loves his country so much that he successfully aided in avenging national tragedies on 2 different occasions, even being knighted by the princess herself. Ike isn't just the most adorable kid in South Park, he's one of the most accomplished as well, and that is why we like Ike. When Matt and Trey released The Spirit of Christmas, they unleashed our 4 favorite foul-mouthed boys, Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny, onto the world, changing the landscape of television forever. Obviously, the boys were the stars of the short, but they weren't alone. A group of unnamed children waiting in line to see Santa Claus is also featured, as is a little girl sitting on Santa's lap wearing a distinctive pink beret. Before there was Butters, Tolkien, Clyde, Tweek, Craig, Jimmy, Timmy, or even Ike Brovflovski, there was Wendy Testaburger. The on-again, off-again girlfriend of Stan Marsh, Wendy was initially used as the mouthpiece to satirize feminist issues. It also allowed the boys to navigate the intrusion of a girl in their midst and explore their prepubescent feelings of romance. But in looking at the way Wendy has been portrayed over the last quarter of a century, it's actually pretty clear that she is one of the most interesting, complex, and well-developed characters in all of South Park, even if some viewers don't always recognize that.
And that's just the kind of sexist bullcrap that's going to keep you in the kitchen. Sit your ass down.
On the surface, Wendy seems like the token girl character of South Park. With their first major appearance in the pilot episode, Cartman Gets an Anal Probe. She's immediately established as Stan's love interest, complete with twinkling hearts around his head and an exaggerated smile when he sees her from across the cafeteria. With her comes one of the series' first repeated gags.
This is for you. Ew.
But Wendy is and always has been so much more than just Stan's girlfriend. The first season establishes her most identifiable character traits. She's unquestionably the smartest student at South Park Elementary, she's an unapologetic feminist, she's an outspoken activist, she speaks multiple languages, she's arguably the most mature character in school, if not the entire town, and she's the only person who can legitimately put Eric Cartman in his place.
What about not holding anything against the person who wins?
Well, not if it's Cartman.
But Wendy is also far from perfect. She's possessive of Stan, she's insecure about her appearance, she experiences jealousy amongst her friends, she falls into the social trappings of girl hate, and she's not opposed to throwing hands or launching a substitute teacher into the sun with the help of Iraqi soldiers when she feels threatened.
I told her, don't f*** with Wendy Testaburger.
If you've spent any amount of time amongst South Park fans, Wendy is easily one of the most polarizing characters. She's openly hated by a very vocal part of the fan base, often the type who relate a little too closely to Cartman. Just recently, this tweet from Trayfon pointed out that Wendy placed 95th on Ranker's most hated/annoying characters list, where users could vote amongst literally any and every character in any film or TV show ever made, regardless of medium or genre.
We got him back!
But I understand the hate she gets because as the de facto main female character, Wendy often becomes the show's stand-in for women in general. But there are a lot of people out there who will find her annoying or hate her simply because she's not one of the boys.
Boo, Wendy Testaburger, boo.
Viewers often misremember Wendy as nothing more than a caricature of a feminist buzzkill, but even from the very first season, Wendy has always been a lot more complicated and the furthest thing from a stereotype. In the season 2 episode Chef's Chocolate Salty Balls, when the Sundance Film Festival is moved to South Park, Wendy is excited to experience the glory of independent cinema, despite Cartman declaring that they're all black and white hippie movies about gay cowboys eating pudding. She tries like hell to immerse herself in the films, but even she can't help but admit at the end of the episode,
Sometimes I forget that even though a few independent films are great, most of them suck ass.
in Chef Goes Nanners, Wendy commits what many fans consider to be her ultimate crime. After Chef rightfully declares that the visibly racist South Park flag is racist, Stan and Kyle take the side of maintaining the town's history by not changing the flag, while Wendy understandably takes the side of changing the design. Much to her dismay, Cartman joins her side not because he cares about racism, but because he wants to beat Stan and Kyle in the debate. It's her biggest nightmare, but the more she spends time with him, she notices they actually have a lot of things in common. She starts developing sexual tension with Cartman, and at the advice of Bebe, kisses him in front of the entire town to get it out of her system.
There. Now, the main point we would like to make.
Stan, Kyle, and everyone really look on in horror, but this is exactly what she needed. She delivers her speech, the town's flag is changed, and with the sexual tension broken, she no longer has to agonize over her inexplicable attraction. After kissing Cartman, her feelings for him go away completely, but it's very obvious that Cartman still liked her at the end of the episode. He sighs and looks dejected as she leaves the town meeting with Stan, and it can be inferred that this might be one of the reasons he's been especially antagonistic towards her ever since.
As soon as it was over, all my feelings for you just vanished.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Wendy exists as the antithesis of Cartman, which means that many of his fans are going to feel the same way about her as he does. They hate her, and I suspect that part of this is because they know deep down she's often right. But Wendy is no more or less problematic than any of the other characters, and has always followed the same ethos of South Park, where nothing and no one is above mockery, where everyday situations are exaggerated to the extreme in order to satirize. The difference is that American society tends to default to the boys' point of view, as does the show. Anything they deal with is viewed as a universal, relatable experience by much of the audience, while anything Wendy-centric is seen as women's issues.
Wendy, we're gonna get you, Wendy. Where are your boobs? We're gonna kill you.
This means that Wendy has to persevere in a way the majority of the other characters don't have to, because say what you will about how South Park has been viewed as insensitive or how people see the feminist aspects of Wendy as annoying, she is very often right. She's positioned as the girls' version of Stan as the de facto leader, but Wendy fulfills a nearly identical role as Kyle, who is typically accepted as the show's moral compass. They're both usually the first of their friend group to stand up for what's right, they're both noticeably more progressive-minded than their comrades, they're both unafraid to call out Cartman as the sociopath he is, but because she happens to be a girl, she has to put up with a lot more adversity as a result. When Stan or Kyle call out Cartman for being an asshole, it's seen as justified criticism or even playful ribbing between friends, but when Wendy does it, no matter how much Cartman deserves it, some instinctually view her as being a bitch.
I do not directly say she's a slut. Wendy Testaburger has proven time and time again that she will do anything to pleasure her vagina.
It's as though she has to take Cartman's abuse or risk being viewed as over-emotional. Their conflict reaches critical mass in Breast Cancer Show Ever, when Wendy finally beats the brakes off Cartman in front of everyone for making jokes about breast cancer. This is easily one of Wendy's best episodes, with an incredible performance from her current voice actress, April Stewart.
You don't get it, asshole! There is nothing you can do to stop this fight!
Man, this is one of the most cathartic episodes in the entire series because it's one of the few times where Cartman gets what's coming to him. Somehow, some fans still treat Cartman like a hero, but I don't know what you can do about that. Cartman, who got his ass handed to him by Wendy in front of the whole school and cried about his friends not finding him cool anymore, as they told him to his face that they've never thought he was cool. Cartman, who begged, bribed, manipulated her parents, and even ate his own underwear to try and get out of this fight. Yeah, dude's a role model. Wendy's beatdown to me is one of the most satisfying moments in South Park history, establishing that when it comes to Wendy Testaburger, equal rights means equal fights too.
Wendy?
I'm finished!
Matt and Trey walk a fine line with Wendy because in addition to her role as the girl character, Stan has to like her, and we as the audience have to understand why Stan likes her so much as well. After all, Stan loves her enough not to kill her when she turns into a zombie during the first Halloween episode, even though she embarrassed him in front of the whole school by bailing on their couple's costume. He loves her enough to convince Elton John to play her the song he wrote for her at Chef Aid, and he loves her enough to spend the entirety of South Park Bigger, Longer, and Uncut pining after her and singing a song about his unrequited feelings towards her.
There's the girl that I like.
It isn't until the movie that Stan vomits on Wendy without fully grossing her out, a sign that this milestone in their relationship is extremely important to both of their character development. If Wendy is presented exclusively as the obnoxious, shrewd know-it-all that many fans see her as, there would be no investment in her and Stan's relationship. When Wendy dumps him for Tolkien in the Raisins episode, he's depressed enough to join the goth kids and start writing downright pathetic poetry. It's an overdramatic response to be sure, but to Stan, it's the most intense heartbreak he's ever experienced. Because for as much as Cartman antagonizes her and as much as Stan likes to play it cool in front of the boys, he genuinely loves Wendy. She supports him, she listens to him, she motivates him to never give up, and she's constantly challenging the way Stan views the world around him. She makes him better, and he knows it, even if having a girlfriend is totally lame.
You want to hold hands with a girl, gay wad?
Wendy does of course have a history of jealousy, like the time she got breast implants because Bebe was getting more attention after growing breasts on her own and Bebe's boobs destroy society, micromanaging Stan's Facebook use and You Have Zero Friends, and of course, killing Miss Ellen.
Hey, Wendy, Susie, you need to stop with this whole jealousy thing. Yeah, you're acting like a freak, Wendy. No, I'm not acting like a freak!
But that's pretty typical for a young relationship. Stan shows just as much, if not more, jealousy in their relationship and is pretty frequently neglectful of the relationship in general. He's threatened by Gregory in Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. He has one of his biggest fights with Kyle when he's paired with Wendy in Follow That Egg and can't handle seeing someone else play mom and dad with his girlfriend. He has a crisis when Bryden moves to town in Elementary School Musical, and when she does finally dump him in Raisins, Matt and Trey chose the needle drop of Cinderella's Don't Know What You Got Till It's Gone to express Stan's pain. They're telling the audience that Stan messed up here, but people still blame her for the breakup.
Wendy breaks up with you.
Whoa, wait a minute. What did I do wrong? I haven't even talked to Wendy for weeks.
So the joke here is that Stan was obviously ignoring and neglecting his relationship with Wendy. Stan taking Wendy for granted is even explored in the most recent season as well. He's scared of losing her when she expresses insecurity that he doesn't communicate with her as well as Clyde does with Bebe. Rather than actually listen to Wendy, he starts using ChatGPT to answer her texts on his behalf. Wendy feels the most secure with Stan that she ever has and begins to confide in him things she's never shared across their entire relationship or really with anyone else.
I've been so scared for so long to tell anyone what happened to me when I was 6.
And even after learning the truth about the generative AI texts, she still forgives Stan. It definitely feels like any criticism thrown at Wendy for being a bad girlfriend is a serious double standard against a female character. But that doesn't mean Wendy herself isn't incapable of this kind of behavior either.
What kids were complaining about health and sustainability? What kids would care at all? The girls.
The girls?
The fucking girls.
Wendy is a self-proclaimed feminist, but life's circumstances frequently force her to question her values. Early seasons of South Park paint her with the standard hypocritical liberal brush that plague many of the episodes before season 5, but Wendy is at her most interesting when exploring her relationships with the other girls at school, the societal pressures of womanhood, and navigating her own identity, because Wendy represents a truth about growing up socialized as a girl that is seldom talked about, the way society instills bias, and how hard it can be to unlearn and overcome those biases, even when you're a victim of them.
Slut.
Wendy slut-shamed Bebe for going through puberty and has been extremely critical of women she deems lesser than, like Paris Hilton or Kim Kardashian, but none of her critiques exist in a vacuum. Like many kids, Wendy struggles with peer pressures, ones that can be particularly difficult to deal with as a young girl, so obviously she doesn't always get it right.
Sorry, Wendy. You're just not a whore. Get lost. Yeah.
One of her biggest conflicts takes place during Stupid Spoiled Whore video playset. In this one, her belief that glorifying socialites with sex tapes is a negative influence on young girls is in direct conflict with her desire to fit in with the other girls at school. She has a massive identity crisis and looks to Mr. Slave for advice, and her comfort with Mr. Garrison's sloppy sub is a great look at Wendy's nuanced approach to sexuality. Her issue is not that she's sex negative, it's that she's worried the girls in her class are too young for all of this, and given the fact that they're all in elementary school, she is correct.
The homosexual is right. From now on, baby, you're going to dress like a little girl.
But because Wendy is not immune from the influences of society, she's also not immune to groupthink. When Butters invades Heidi's sleepover in Margarine, she just stands by while the rest of the girls berate this poor new student. But it's Wendy who eventually stands up for her, rallying all the girls together to apologize and make things right. Even when she screws up, Wendy always makes it a priority to stick with the girls.
Nobody likes me.
Oh, geez, she's really upset. I feel terrible, you guys.
But at the same time, Wendy has no problem being the one to call people out when they're acting out of line. This is why when Stan comes to her after the girls publish a list naming Kyle the ugliest boy in school, and it makes him lose his mind, Wendy helps Stan investigate, even though they weren't a couple at the time.
How dare you take advantage of your position? I'm gonna tell Bebe and have you both disbarred from the list committee.
When she eventually confronts Bebe about the plan to manipulate the list, she's willing to get physical to stop her because she feels it's the right thing to do. Even if she doesn't get there right away, Wendy's evolution has gotten her to a place where she fights for true justice, even if it's difficult. Wendy is a true feminist. She's not interested in female supremacy. She's interested in equitable treatment of all gender identities. Her selflessness and Stan's newfound maturity bring them both to a place where they can rekindle their relationship again. The time apart was good for them, as evidenced by this.
It's been really great hanging out with you again. I feel like you've changed somehow, in a really awesome way.
But even still, Wendy is navigating a constantly shifting social landscape. The Hobbit sees Wendy desperately trying to push back against the way Photoshop celebrities on social media have irreversibly screwed up the way women perceive themselves and the way men think women are supposed to look in real life, sending Wendy on another one of her activist crusades. Let's be real, Wendy is right every step of the way in this episode, but her harsh approach to try and snap people out of it comes off as harmful, leading the whole school to conclude that she's just jelly and discredit anything she says.
Mr. Mackey, I was trying to show kids.
No excuses. You have a problem being jelly, Wendy.
It's equal parts infuriating and depressing watching Wendy's words be willfully misunderstood and taken in bad faith for an entire episode, knowing how true to life this can be. Women are often mislabeled as difficult, unprofessional, bitter, haters, or yes, even jelly. At the end of the episode, Wendy finally accepts defeat. She gives in to peer pressure and photoshops her own image. It is a really bleak ending, not only for Wendy as a character, but for what it says about our culture. South Park gives Wendy that space to accept and mourn what the world has become and doesn't judge her for following along as a means of social survival, a grace that most women are not extended in real life.
Oh my god. I don't know if I can go through with this.
And despite her shortcomings and often fraught relationships with her fellow girls, she ultimately values her solidarity with them above all else. During the height of skank hunt trolling, Wendy instigates a protest that turns into a mass breakup in response to the harassment the girls and their mothers have received online. Wendy has second thoughts, but is revived by the passions of her radicalized sisters. She joins the rest of the girls, and she dumps Stan, giving him a note that reads, "I can't fix you," breaking his heart again. This is a moment pulled straight from Lysistrata, an ancient Greek play about women banding together to end a war by denying all of the other men's sex unless they stop fighting. It's one of the most feminist plays ever written, and the show validates Wendy's feminist beliefs by modernizing this material and positioning her as the ringleader. South Park has been accused of being nothing more than offensive humor and juvenile punchlines for 25 years at least. But Wendy is some of the biggest proof that the show has evolved, as has Matt and Trey's approach to writing female characters. The initially shrill nature of her activism has grown into justified outrage, and her faults are not presented as a result of hypocrisy, but because Wendy is an elementary schooler still learning how to navigate a society that demonizes and dismisses her just for existing. She may be more mature than the rest of the class, but that doesn't mean she should be held to a higher standard. But because she's a girl, she is often held to a higher standard, and the show is better for not pretending that she's not treated differently because of her gender. That acknowledgement is not a reflection of an anti-feminist South Park fandom, nor is it a critique of Matt and Trey. It's just a confirmation of how society actually functions. Despite everything staked up against her, Wendy perseveres. She's been around since the very beginning, a vital pillar to the South Park series, and no amount of unjustified hatred is going to make her go away. Point blank, do not fuck with Wendy Testaburger. Jimmy Valmer wasn't introduced in South Park until season 5, but since then he's become one of the most prominent kids outside of the main four. In fact, outside of Butters, I think he may have the most episodes focused on him out of any other kid in South Park. And there's good reason for that. Jimmy is an incredibly well-rounded character, he's super funny, and his interests and moral compass create a ton of narrative possibilities in the show. So today, let's dive into everything that makes Jimmy Valmer one of the most likable kids in South Park. Jimmy's introduction in Season 5's Cripple Fight is pretty iconic, but it's also kind of amazing for introducing nearly every facet of Jimmy's personality almost immediately. Some things were a bit more subtle and expanded on later, but just about everything we love about Jimmy was there in his very first episode. Interestingly, Jimmy's last name is first revealed to be Swanson in the episode Crazy Cripples, but was later changed to Valmer. South Park has a habit of changing character names. Detective Harris later became Sergeant Harrison Yates. Token Williams is now Tolkien Black. Or no, I guess he was always Tolkien, right? And honestly, this could be any combination of a mistake, laziness, mind changing, etc. It's not that big a deal. Jimmy was even seemingly meant to be a one-off character, a single episode rival to Timmy. He first appears in the kids' scout troop, implying that he doesn't go to school with them, and he's basically framed as a motivational speaker.
I travel to different states and talk to kids about being proud of what they are.
Though never confirmed in the series, it's speculated that Jimmy most likely has the condition Pfeiffer syndrome, based on his physical appearance. And honestly, the show treats Jimmy really well. He's not ashamed or insecure about his disability, he embraces it, and he even makes light fun of himself to break the ice.
My mom says God has a plan for everyone. I guess I was plan B.
And though it isn't explicitly stated, it seems like Jimmy's strong sense of humor may have in part become prominent as a means to make friends, which obviously can be more difficult for kids with disabilities. His comedy pretty instantly endears him to the other kids at Scouts.
Jimmy's funny, dude. Yeah, well, he's the coolest kid with disabilities in the world.
As I mentioned, this episode introduces just about everything that would become a prominent aspect of Jimmy's character and personality as he evolved and was featured more often over the series. Obviously, the major one being his love of stand-up comedy and performing, but the episode also showcases how likable and genuinely nice he is, and how easily he makes friends. However, Jimmy also has some pretty significant rivalries, and baked right into this episode is Timmy's jealousy towards Jimmy, creating a major rift and causing them to fight. That's what the whole episode's about. And lastly, though a bit less focused on, is the fact that Jimmy has a very strong moral compass. He will almost always fight for what he believes is right, showcased in this one by his attempts to help get Big Gay Al reinstated as their scout leader. Though there are definitely exceptions in certain stories, these seem to be the biggest things that define Jimmy as a character. And the character was so well received and so well liked by Matt and Trey that they ended up dropping him into small roles in other episodes, allowing all of these ideas introduced in his debut to be expanded on. And eventually, he was a big part of countless amazing episodes.
Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Jimmy!
Thank you. Wow, what a terrific audience.
Obviously, first and foremost, Jimmy's major focus is stand-up comedy, and there's at least half a dozen episodes that revolve around this to some degree. And there are countless smaller moments in other episodes that highlight this interest as well, like his second ever appearance in How to Eat With Your Butt. When Cartman loses his ability to laugh after seeing people with butts for faces, he goes to Jimmy for some quality comedy to make him laugh.
Why did the pigeon cross the road? Okay, why? Because it was having sex with the chick. Because it was having sex with the chick.
The entire inciting incident for Jimmy's second major episode, Crazy Cripples, is that he's angry his friends decided to go see Christopher Reeve instead of supporting him at his stand-up comedy show.
Christopher Reeve?
You know Christopher Reeve, the guy who played Superman?
I know who he is.
Though the episode didn't ultimately revolve around stand-up, it's often a major part of his storylines. In Douche and Turd, the kids specifically ask Jimmy which write-in candidate is funnier, a giant douche or a turd sandwich, because they respect his opinion as a comedian. He opts for giant douche.
They're both instant classics, but I guess I'll have to go with Giant Douche, simply because the fact that it's a giant renders it useless, adding a parody slant to the satire.
I think this also goes a long way to show how serious Jimmy takes his comedy, and the lengths he would go to perform that stand-up unimpeded is probably best showcased in Season 9's Erection Day. When Jimmy starts getting erections in class, and fears that it will happen to him during his stand-up routine at the talent show, he goes far out of his way to try and fix the problem by hiring a prostitute, thanks to some bad advice from Officer Barbrady. He then gets into a high-speed chase, he is shot in the process, all so that he can secure this woman's services. But there's probably no better episode about Jimmy's joke writing than the all-timer fish sticks.
Say, Eric, do you like fish sticks? Yeah? You like putting fish sticks in your mouth? Yeah? Well, what are you, Eric? A gay fish?
This is one of the best examples because it shows how deeply Jimmy cares about the craft of joke writing. He sets time aside in his day to craft new jokes, he workshops them, and ultimately, he's just happy that he's come up with such a successful and groundbreaking gag. Until other people start taking credit for it, which we will talk about more later. Jimmy even hosts the Comedy Awards in the episode Funny Bot, winning the award for funniest kid in school, but also deeply angering the Germans in the process, who then create Funny Bot. Jimmy is the only one early on to see the damage Funnybot is going to do with his comedy.
Honestly, I hate having to do homework more than I hate having to do Riot Gumble in his asshole. Awkward.
And even though it was fictional, the fact that Jimmy so deeply ties comedy to the origin for his superhero character and franchise prequel and The Fractured But Whole says a lot about how integral it is in his life.
Your newborn son will never be able to walk, but he will be extremely good at comedy.
Wow, what a terrific audience.
I mean, just think about a late night talk show host. Any late night talk show host. Any late night talk show host that is currently on the air. There is like a 50% chance that that guy's name is Jimmy. In fact, canonically, Jimmy becomes a late night talk show host in the future, which truly feels like the most perfect combination of so many of Jimmy's attributes.
What is up with these bisexual Canadians, huh? I guess they don't know whether to fuck their brother or their sister.
But one of the coolest things South Park did was expand Jimmy's performing skills outside of comedy. Music, in particular, is something Jimmy's shown to be extremely adept at. Even his role in South Park: The Stick of Truth is a bard. He's shown to play both the lute and the flute in that game. His attacks and abilities are almost entirely built around playing music.
Prepare for battle, weaklings. Elves, fall in.
On top of this, at summer camp, Jimmy performs a great musical number for everyone else with his ukulele.
So I made up my mind that I'd strike a band, the tiny cocker girl I did a
He also plays drums in the band Crimson Dawn with Stan, Butters, and Kenny.
And a 1, and a 2, and a...
And of course, he serenades the entire town with his singing voice for the 12 Days of Christmas in Red Sleigh Down.
On the 4th day of Christmas, my true love gave.
Jimmy is also co-anchor of the school news in Quest for Ratings, showing not just his performing abilities, but foreshadowing his future gig on television. As does the fact that he tries to give Kyle his headshot when he thinks that he runs Hollywood. He also joins the boys in starting a wrestling league, giving a dramatic performance in the ring. There is just a huge variety of types of performing on Jimmy's resume. There's nobody else in South Park who even comes close. But alongside these various performing roles, whether it's stand-up, acting, or hosting, come a wide variety of relationships. And though Jimmy makes tons of friends along the way, he also makes a lot of enemies. Even in that very first appearance, Jimmy made a great impression on the other boys. They instantly took to Jimmy and were excited to spend more time with him, but he also sparked some massive jealousy in Timmy, who even tried to kill Jimmy by making him wear one of Kenny's parkas. And to be fair, though Jimmy is mostly a really nice kid, he did make fun of Timmy through his comedy.
Timmy! Timmy! I'm living a lie, Timmy!
Obviously, this culminated in the huge fight between Jimmy and Timmy, probably the meanest and angriest we've ever seen Jimmy. He really does bring out intense emotions from the people around him. Many really like him, but many really hate him. Timmy even gets Jimmy kicked out of the Scouts by photoshopping a lewd picture of him, which felt like Matt and Trey writing him out of the show for his one-off appearance. Obviously, even those dudes liked him enough to bring him back. He really is a likable fella. In season 6, after Kenny's untimely death, and then also after the boys fire Butters from their friend group, Jimmy was part of their bachelor-style dating show to find a new fourth friend. This was early on in Jimmy's life in South Park, and overall, he made a solid impression.
I think the person that stood out most at the amusement park was Jimmy.
Honestly, in these earlier appearances, Jimmy wasn't quite as sure of himself as we would see him become later. He's typically known as a very kind and genuine guy, but he comes across as a bit desperate and phony in this friend competition.
Just one more rose, Kyle. Jimmy.
Oh boy! Oh, thank God!
He obviously makes it into the final round, so the boys clearly like Jimmy well enough, but the uncharacteristic desperation kinda sinks his chances.
Hey, fellas, I was just in the neighborhood and I thought I'd stop by this gift basket. Oh, thanks, Jimmy.
Maybe Jimmy became more aware of this desperation, because it seems like after this he becomes very confident in who he is, especially through making new friends. Even though his inaugural appearance ends with Timmy still loathing him, even that doesn't last. We never actually see the pair become friends, but by the next Jimmy-focused episode, he and Timmy are besties, and remain that way throughout the rest of the series. And the entire episode is about them making wildly unlikely friends. Though the major inciting incident for these new friends is Jimmy fully resenting Christopher Reeve for getting getting so much attention for his handicap. Jimmy feels like it isn't fair that Reeve gets so much attention when he wasn't born with his handicap, while people like Timmy and Jimmy get no attention, which is sort of an interesting inverse of his initial appearance, where Timmy was jealous of Jimmy getting attention. Jimmy and Timmy mistakenly join the Crips thinking they're a handicap club. Jimmy's significant confidence in himself and his genuine nature get him accepted by a gang.
The only real Crips is born Crips, dawg.
I agree. I mean, it's like, come on.
This episode does highlight Jimmy's ignorance a bit. He obviously had no idea what he was actually getting himself into. He and Timmy get credit for taking out a huge crew of Bloods when they were actually just trying to get snacks for the Crips, which also made a big difference in how they perceived him.
And they got us marshmallows and ginger ale.
And with this genuine attitude and complete confidence in who he is, he literally got the Crips and Bloods to forgive each other with a lock-in at the rec center.
What did you say?
I said, come on.
You know, maybe he's right. I mean, come on.
Jimmy's earnest and genuine nature is truly one of his best qualities, and it clearly shines through for lots of different people. Even him telling jokes to Cartman to try and fix his ability to laugh was just a really kind thing to do for a not very kind person. Jimmy is shown to hang out with a ton of different kids. In Good Times with Weapons, he's hanging out with Craig Tolkien and Clyde.
What's the matter, Phyllis? Are you ninjas or pussies?
He's even on the baseball team, and he's just as depressed when they have to play in the playoffs as all the other kids.
All the other teams are worse than us.
Yeah, let's face it, we're winners.
Jimmy is even shown to be pretty good with women. In Up the Down steroid, he's dating a girl named Nancy. He goes on a couple really good dates in Erection Day before he ruins them, which is mostly out of his ignorance of the situation he finds himself in, and less because he's an actual asshole. Before that, the dates were going really well. But there is one character who truly just detests Jimmy, even more than Timmy did in his debut. More than Jimmy hates Christopher Reeve even, and that is Nathan.
I can't stand him, Mimsy. That Jimmy kid makes my fucking skin crawl.
Nathan is another kid in the special ed class at South Park, and he's introduced as a drug dealer who gets Jimmy into steroids for the Special Olympics. But later, Nathan develops a severe hatred of Jimmy in a primarily one-sided rivalry. Jimmy definitely does not seem to be as aware of Nathan's disdain for him. It seems to stem from summer camp. Because of these annual summer camp games, Jimmy is the captain for the blue team, while Nathan is the captain for the red team, and Jimmy's team wins every single year. Rather than trying to actually succeed at the games, Nathan tries to sabotage Jimmy the entire time, even trying to kill him by putting C4 in his ukulele. But Nathan is sort of the Wile E. Coyote to Jimmy's Roadrunner. He continually tries to sabotage him or hurt him, only to get the brunt of it himself. Even sort of a more serious storyline in Season 19's Ad Trilogy, this ends up being the case. While Jimmy works with the government to try and figure out how to combat the evolution of ads, Nathan works with the ads and successfully kidnaps Jimmy. He holds him hostage at gunpoint in the apartment he paid for with his ad money, and though it appears as though Nathan really got the upper hand here, eventually Jimmy wins over Nathan's girlfriend Classy, who then beats the shit out of him. This dynamic reemerges in Season 21's Moss Piglets as well. Nathan is convinced he'll beat Jimmy and Timmy in the science fair with their volcano experiment, but Jimmy and Timmy are working with actual tardigrades. They're doing like real science.
What? How? Where the fuck did you learn about these things?
Honestly, Nathan is a really funny character. Let me know if you'd like to see a video about him at some point. But even with that one-sided rivalry, it doesn't seem like Jimmy really hates anybody. Outside of Christopher Reeve, of course. Though, he certainly doesn't have much love for Cartman, and for pretty great reasons. Obviously, Cartman is just sort of the worst, but Jimmy has been the brunt of this a few times. In Casa Bonita, Cartman asks Jimmy the secret to acting nice to people. Jimmy gives him some genuine advice, and Cartman just instantly uses him to try to win over Kyle.
Take that, Jimmy, and that! And don't you ever talk bad about Kyle again! Kyle is my friend!
In the episode, Tst, Cartman tries to crash at Jimmy's house when his mom hires Caesar Milan to get him to behave.
We've always been best friends. We know everything about each other. What's my last name? God damn it.
In Breast Cancer Show Ever, after Wendy beats the shit out of Cartman, Jimmy says to his face how he really feels about him.
We've always thought you suck.
Yeah, nothing's changed. Our opinion of you can't possibly go any lower.
And this was even before the fish sticks incident, where Jimmy wrote a groundbreaking joke and Eric did literally everything he could to take credit from him. Cartman drags Jimmy onto talk shows so they can hype up their joke, when Jimmy actually just cares about comedy fundamentally and making people laugh.
Well, Ellen, the truth of the matter is that there's never really been a team like us before.
But by the end of the episode, Cartman not only had taken partial credit, he took all of the credit and insulted Jimmy as some kind of sociopath in the process, basically projecting everything he represents onto poor Jimmy, who is one of the nicest dudes in South Park.
Jimmy, I owe you an apology. I realize now you can't help believing you created the entire joke, because your ego won't let you think otherwise.
And in season 20, Jimmy even takes part in destroying all of Cartman's devices, assuming he was the infamous internet troll Skank Hunt 42. It shows how he really feels about Cartman, but it also ultimately sort of represents a lapse in something else that is really important to Jimmy's character, his moral compass. And though he does have a very strong code of ethics that he truly believes in, Jimmy also seems to fall the hardest when upholding those morals sometimes.
This isn't the news. This is a travesty.
Alongside Jimmy's genuine and kind nature comes some pretty strong moral fortitude. For the most part, over the course of the series, Jimmy is shown to be pretty selfless and follow his own code of ethics. One of his earliest appearances is the all-time classic Return of the Fellowship to the Two Towers, where he joins the boys in their quest to return a porno tape to a video store in another town. Which means the 6th graders are desperate to get their hands on it, and Jimmy selflessly sacrifices himself to try and stop those 6th graders while en route to the store. Obviously, we've talked about fish sticks and how Cartman sort of dragged Jimmy down a path he wasn't interested in with their joke. Jimmy didn't see comedy as something that should be commodified the way Cartman did. He was happy enough making people laugh with a great joke. This goes hand in hand with his journey in the episode Funny Bot. Jimmy hosts the Comedy Awards, which is the same sort of commodification he protested in Fish Sticks. And when the Comedy Awards lead to the creation of Funny Bot, a massive comedy sensation who has put in countless TV shows and movies, Jimmy relearns what's at stake when comedy is commodified in the same way.
What's the meta is this funny bot is taking the humanity out of comedy. I don't think things are better, I think they're worse.
Many of Jimmy's stories focus on his moral compass. In Quest for Ratings, Jimmy co-anchors the school news, but when Craig's low-effort show annihilates them in ratings, they desperately try to change their program to cater to the audience. Obviously, this is mostly about how reality TV was changing the landscape of television, and a scathing indictment of how real-life news shows adjusted in response, but in the episode, Jimmy is the one person who really seems to take issue with the way they're treating journalism.
This isn't the news. This is a travesty.
He gets an interview with the vice president, but they won't show it because they think it's too boring. Jimmy is the only one in the group who has a moral objection to the ethics of their quote-unquote reporting.
This isn't the news. This is a bastardized quest for ratings.
Journalism actually becomes a major thing that Jimmy is interested in moving forward. In season 19, he's shown to be the editor of the school newspaper, the Super School News. Jimmy defends one of his writer's decisions to use the R word in that newspaper and stands his ground against PC Principal, refusing to allow him to censor the paper. The core issue here being that Jimmy won't let any kind of overseeing governing body determine what can and can't be reported on in his paper. The use of the word itself isn't really the issue, it's the idea that an outside force can dictate the news itself. Jimmy fights for this right tooth and nail and even begins distributing the paper himself when PC Principal insists that he has to approve it before it's distributed.
Suck my dick, PC Principal.
But there are absolutely instances where Jimmy's moral compass falters in pretty major ways. One of the biggest Jimmy episodes is Up the Down Steroid when he's competing in the Special Olympics. He's convinced by Nathan to start using steroids to train, which is probably the least ethical thing Jimmy has ever done. And even worse, in his roid rage, he beats up his girlfriend and mother, truly the most horrible thing we've ever seen him do. Jimmy obviously learns his lesson and makes amends, but he does have an unfortunate tendency to fall pretty harshly when it comes to these ethical quandaries. He even seems to succumb to peer pressure in some situations. In Ginger Kids, he, alongside a few others, bully one of the Gingers pretty brutally.
You can't eat in the cafeteria.
How come? Ginger Kid's eating the hallway.
Yeah, go on, beat it.
And in Freemium Isn't Free, he's hired by the Canadian government to peddle freemium games to kids, all because he needs to pay off his own freemium gaming debts. Granted, in this situation, he had dug a pretty big hole for himself and deeply regretted it, so there's some empathy for his plight. But while Jimmy is definitely one of the most honest and genuine kids in town, he's certainly not without his faults, obviously. The latest Jimmy storyline actually highlights what is probably the most nuanced moral situation that he's ever faced. In the episode Japanese Toilets, it's revealed that Jimmy wrote an article about the truth behind the true level of control that toilet paper companies have over the United States. And though he felt morally obligated to bring this to light, those companies came after him.
They took everything from me, Stan. My bike, my cat. They were gonna sue my parents for what I wrote in the school paper.
This is such a fascinating place to put Jimmy, where his moral compass is truly put to the test. He had already refused to kneel to PC Principal in regards to what he publishes in the school paper, but now there's an even greater threat pressing down on him. It forces Jimmy to ask such a difficult question. Do you maintain your journalistic integrity, or do you risk your family's financial ruin? Jimmy obviously chose to protect his family. And Jimmy's love of his parents is another major example of his genuine kindness and his integrity, because though his parents seem to be supportive, generally loving parents, they've also made some absolutely horrific implications about Jimmy before, specifically that he himself is their punishment for making fun of disabled kids when they were younger.
You were sent here through the vengeful and angry hand of God to teach your mother and I a lesson.
All things considered, Jimmy could have been a resentful, angry young kid, but the fact that he remains so caring and positive with such a strong sense of right and wrong is a real testament to his character. There's a reason he made such a big impact on not only the world of South Park, but on Matt and Trey, who chose to elevate him from a one-off character to a series regular. He's a good kid, but he's not without his flaws, and his unique perspective brings a lot to the show. South Park is a better place with Jimmy Valmer in it. Ah, Timmy.
You ready, Timmy?
Allegedly, he is living a lie. But is he? Timmy Burch wasn't introduced until season 4 of South Park, but he instantly made a huge splash and is easily one of the fandom's favorite characters in the show. I think it would be easy to expect South Park to make the handicapped kid a punchline, but on the contrary, Timmy is an incredibly well-rounded and well-respected character by both fans and the other characters in the show. And though he maybe doesn't get as much focus as he did previously, he remains easily one of the most popular. So today, let's explore the ins and outs of South Park's Timmy Burch. Timmy was first introduced in a pretty small bit part of Season 4's premiere, Tooth Fairy's Tats 2000, initially to help try and pull Kenny's tooth out for the boys' Tooth Fairy scheme. Matt and Trey say on the DVD commentary that they had to really fight with Comedy Central for Timmy's inclusion, that the network was incredibly worried about backlash.
You know, our defense was, and it still is with Timmy and people who have problems with characters like that, is we think of Timmy and the boys think of Timmy as a full-fledged human being. And he's not bummed out, and they're not ripping on him for his disability, and he's just part of the fun, really.
And I think Matt and Trey's rationale in this counter-argument is exactly why Timmy is such a beloved and celebrated character. Sure, his handicap is the subject of storylines and jokes, and his mannerisms and catchphrases are used as punchlines sometimes, but Timmy himself is never the joke. He's a real character. He's a real part of this world who is accepted and not ignored. And later in Season 4, they properly introduce him in the episode Timmy 2000, an episode that sort of reconciles with this very idea by having Timmy become the lead singer of a band called Lords of the Underworld. There are basically two reactions to Timmy's inclusion in the band in this episode. The people who think him singing in this band is rad as hell and rock out to their dope music, and the people who think that his inclusion in the band is a form of ridicule.
That handicap dude rules! Yeah! You guys are terrible. How can you laugh at that poor kid?
And I think these two reactions basically represent Matt and Trey's point of view in how they use Timmy as a character, and the network's point of view in how they wanted to prevent them from showing him at all. In this episode, Timmy gets to do something super cool, and people think he's great at it. He's treated like a real person. But there are these other people who think he's being used like a prop. But their alternative is just that he doesn't get to do these things because of their own perceptions that he is being used, as though he doesn't have any autonomy. Like the network's initial stance, they would just rather handicapped characters and people be ignored and pushed to the margins, because in their mind, Timmy being the lead singer of a band isn't something people could possibly be taking seriously, ironically making them the ones who are othering Timmy. And in South Park in general, the kids just see Timmy as one of them, and they see what he's doing in this episode as rad as hell.
How would you like to be handicapped? Do you think that would be funny? You're making him feel bad.
He looks pretty happy to me.
Oh, you people make me sick.
And Timmy even has his own little arc in this episode with his bandmate Skylar. Though he's manipulated by Phil Collins, Skylar gets jealous that the focus is all put on Timmy and taken off the Lords of the Underworld. But by the end of the episode, not only do they make up and play Lollabalobala, but Timmy, known for only saying one thing, says something new specifically for Skylar.
Timmy and Lords of the Underworld.
Though he struggles to convey it through his disability, Timmy is shown to be a character who really understands those around him. He's a fully realized character, and new verbalizations are often used to showcase things Timmy really cares about. We'll talk about more instances of this as the video goes on, but the most important takeaway from this very first Timmy-focused episode is how much the other kids care about him as a person, and that they don't like seeing him pushed to the margins.
The people that are wrong are the ones that think people like Timmy should be protected and kept out of the public's eye. The cool thing about Timmy being in a band was that he was in your face, and you had to deal with him.
And throughout season 4, Timmy gets a pretty substantial focus in the series, in large part due to the massive fan reaction to him. But the kids' relation to Timmy largely reflects what was established in this episode. He's either just part of the gang, treated like any other kid, or the kids are standing up for Timmy because the world is treating him unfairly, or because they're genuinely worried about him as a friend. This is particularly explored in the aptly titled Do the Handicapped Go to Hell? In this one, Father Maxie essentially uses fear-mongering tactics to make the kids all terrified of going to hell, believing that they have to confess every one of their sins or they're doomed to burn. And while they're worried about themselves, they're especially worried about Timmy.
Poor Timmy's gonna go to hell. He can't confess his sins because all he can say is his name.
Timmy! Oh man, we can't let Timmy go to hell. We have to do something.
When the world treats Timmy like a burden or tries to write him off, the kids double down in their attempts to include him. It's pretty great. Timmy gets a couple more major features across season 4, including in the episode where the kids all graduate from 3rd grade into 4th grade. The entire class hates their new teacher and wants to go back in time so they can go back to 3rd grade. They work with some college-age dorks to develop a time machine out of Timmy's wheelchair, which ends up putting him in a total speed situation. You know the movie.
I think it was called The Bus That Couldn't Slow Down.
Timmy's chair is moving steadily down the highway with a ticking time bomb on board, and everyone drops everything to try and disarm it until...
Hey, it did work!
Time travel is actually relatively common in South Park. The future people come back in time, the boys change the timeline in the post-COVID specials, the new kid farts through time in Fractured But Whole, but Timmy was actually the first to do it.
Dude, it looks like he's been all over time. He must have such cool stuff to tell us.
Timmy gets the spotlight one last time in season 4, and I mean spotlight quite literally, as he's the star of the 4th grade play, Helen Keller the Musical. This is one of the best Timmy episodes, as they do such a great job conveying his emotions and story arc within his limited dialogue. Timmy picks out a specific turkey to use in the play, one that seems to be the runt of the litter and one that the farmer was planning to kill. Timmy connects to this turkey and names him Gobbles.
His name is Gobbles.
Gobbles!
Cartman wants to replace Gobbles with a theater turkey, but Timmy won't let them abandon Gobbles. It's also really cool that Timmy is literally the lead in this play. Though there's the obvious parallel of the handicapped kid playing Helen Keller, the kids are actually worried in this episode because Timmy is the only one who knows the part, and if they replace Gobbles, he won't do the play. He's literally integral to the play. He is not replaceable. Timmy works so hard the entire episode to train Gobbles for the show, it's honestly really touching. The training and bedtime scenes are really sweet. I love when South Park tugs at the heartstrings, which they do even more when the theater turkey's trainer lies and manipulates Timmy into freeing Gobbles, which gives us a full-on Air Bud type get out of here scene.
Gobbles! Timmy, Gobbles?
Eventually, Timmy bails on the play, realizing that his connection with Gobbles was more important, saving him from hunters and even making it back in time to wow the entire audience with the trick he taught Gobbles.
Oh, wow!
In just the first season that Timmy was introduced, they tread a lot of ground with his character. He got so much focus just within 13 episodes. But the following season, they introduced a new character that would change his dynamic significantly.
Jimmy?
In Season 5's episode Cripple Fight, South Park introduces another beloved handicapped character, Jimmy Valmer. Initially, Jimmy is introduced as a one-off character who is meant to be a sort of foil and rival to Timmy. The entire episode is pretty focused on Timmy's jealousy and insecurity about the kind of attention that Jimmy is receiving.
Jimmy's funny, dude. Yeah, well, he's the coolest kid with disabilities in the world.
Timmy fully resents Jimmy for sweeping the South Park kids off their feet, and it's understandable. He makes one good impression and the boys can't shut up about him.
And best of all, we met this kid named Jimmy. He's disabled, but he doesn't let it ruin his life. He's awesome.
On top of this, Jimmy's stand-up routine and impressions do take aim at Timmy, which doesn't help matters.
Timmy! Timmy! I'm living a lie, Timmy!
Timmy actually goes out of his way to try and harm Jimmy, like actually tries to kill him by giving him Kenny's jacket, after which he narrowly avoids multiple near-death situations. This is really the first time we see Timmy do anything bad towards another kid in the show as well, which I actually think also speaks to Matt and Trey's insistence that he is just a real regular character and not some prop. They aren't putting sanitized representation on screen. He's a fully realized character with flaws and insecurities. Jimmy and Timmy get in a full-on fight fight in a near beat-for-beat parody of the film They Live, and though Jimmy apologizes to Timmy at the end and claims that they're best friends now, Timmy actually ends up photoshopping Jimmy onto some lewd photos to get him kicked out of the Scouts. It seemed like this was supposed to be the last we ever saw of Jimmy, but like Timmy, he ended up being a beloved character and really took off with the fan base. So they decided to keep him around, sort of ignoring the ending of Cripple Fight and making Jimmy and Timmy great pals moving forward. And while Jimmy is also an amazing character, I do think that to a degree, Timmy started to take a back seat to Jimmy after his introduction. From here on out, most episodes that really feature Timmy are often featuring Timmy and Jimmy as a duo. There are exceptions, including some where they're both used really well in different ways in the same episode, and one where Timmy is the main focus completely separate of Jimmy, but so many Timmy episodes after Jimmy's introduction are actually just about the pair of them. Not to say that this is wholly negative, they are a great duo, and they're featured in some great episodes, but it does feel like they used to do a ton of great creative storytelling for Timmy when they didn't have Jimmy to rely on for dialogue. But some of these episodes are truly great. Crazy Cripples, where Jimmy and Timmy start a club called the Crips, only to unwittingly join the gang the Crips in the process, is super funny. Just by being genuine and caring, the pair get the Crips and Bloods to forgive each other, all with a simple lock-in at the rec center. Other episodes where they make a great duo are Crippled Summer, where we see the misadventures the pair get up to at their summer camp, though it mostly focuses on Nathan's hatred of Jimmy. This is also the case for season 21's Moss Piglets, where Jimmy and Timmy team up for the science fair, completely overshadowing Nathan's volcano project with their tardigrade experiment. But there is one episode that explores Jimmy and Timmy's friendship so beautifully without feeling like Timmy is just along for the ride, and that is Up the Down Steroid. In this episode, both Jimmy and Timmy are training for the Special Olympics, but after a little peer pressure from Nathan, Jimmy decides to start taking steroids. This is another episode that does a great job conveying Timmy's struggle, this time being at odds with his best friend after he realizes that Jimmy has been taking steroids.
Timmy! Timmy! Jimmy! Timmy! Timmy! Don't lecture me on the complexities of sportsmanship.
This puts Timmy in the unenviable position of having to decide whether or not he narcs on his friend or lets him continue to hurt himself with those steroids. He tries to tell Mr. Mackey what's going on, but Mackey is just completely incapable of understanding Timmy, unlike the other kids and Jimmy.
Timmy! 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 Timmy!
At the end of the episode at the Special Olympics, Jimmy wins every event he's entered in, and then calls out Cartman for pretending to be handicapped to compete. But in turn, Timmy gets on stage and calls Jimmy out for cheating as well.
Timmy! Oh my god. You're right, Timmy. You're totally right.
Putting them at odds with each other was a great way to give both Jimmy and Timmy an intertwined but still separate story arc in this episode. Whereas in so many of the other Jimmy-Timmy episodes, they sort of go through the motions in tandem. And this is the first and really only time they've been at odds since Cripple Fight. But even though we've gotten limited Timmy-centric storylines in the years since Jimmy's introduction, Timmy's presence has remained constant. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Timmy is always treated as a fully fledged member of the cast, not just like some kind of inclusion token. There are some instances where it's made clear that the kids are making sure Timmy can be included.
We can help Timmy learn how to ice skate too.
And this is because the kids want to play with Timmy, and so Timmy is just generally included. He plays Lord of the Rings with the gang in Return of the Fellowship to the Two Towers. He takes part in the metrosexual trend that sweeps South Park.
Ooh, Timmy.
He's with the group that wants to help free Wilsiak. He plays World of Warcraft with everyone.
You can count on us.
Timmy!
He's seen playing football with the entire gang in The Death of Eric Cartman, and basketball as well in Obama Wins. And to me, this is one of the reasons South Park has some of the best handicap representation in media. It's very rare that Timmy's handicap is the focus of an episode or story, and usually when it is, it's to make these exact points, like in Timmy 2000. But usually, he's just doing something the kids are doing, like when he's the lead in the play in Helen Keller the Musical, or when he and Jimmy are doing groundbreaking tardigrade experiments in Moss Piglets. Timmy 2000 wasn't even the only time he ventured into music. He was the singer in the band featured at the Comedy Awards in Funny Bot.
First annual Comedy Awards.
The most recent entirely Timmy-focused episode we've gotten was all the way back in Season 18's Handy Car, one of the only times Timmy gets the spotlight separate from Jimmy since Jimmy's introduction. In this one, to raise money for summer camp, Timmy starts a rideshare business called Handy Car. He basically uses his wheelchair to zip people around South Park. Not only does he start a successful business, he successfully expands that business into an entire company with tons of other drivers, and then manages to beat every other competitor out in the first wacky races in decades.
It looks like Handy Car has done it!
He beats Lyft, Zipcar, regular old taxis, Dick Dastardly, and of course, Elon Musk, who resorts to buying Handy Car so that he doesn't get shown up by the company. Throwing money at someone else's invention is pretty typical Musk behavior, let's be honest. That's real musky. Timmy could have been set for life, but he actually ends up donating his entire $2.3 billion fortune from Handy Car to his summer camp to ensure that his friends can have a great summer. But though this was the last real fully Timmy-focused episode of the series, this isn't necessarily the last Timmy-focused story. Timmy is a major part of the superhero narrative in Fractured But Whole. He's actually the only character in South Park with two superhero personas. In the original superhero trilogy, he's Iron Maiden, an indestructible metal character. And then, in the Fractured But Whole, he's a Professor X-inspired character named Dr. Timothy, and the leader of the Freedom Pals, one of the two rival superhero teams. In fact, his entire story as Dr. Timothy says a lot about how much his friends love and respect him. Within the narrative of their game, Dr. Timothy is easily one of the most powerful characters. His mind powers can take over any other character to do his bidding, and later in the game, he even grants you the ability to play as any class you want. In the Bring the Crunch DLC, he's even the massive focus of the very final battle that they ever did for any of these games.
And now I'm going to use him against you. This is the end for you, Crunch.
But narratively, he plays an even bigger role. In Fractured But Whole, the gang is fighting over how to plan out their superhero franchise so that everyone involved is happy. It's what leads to their civil war and their rift. But the entire time, Dr. Timothy was working behind the scenes so that everybody could be happy.
Oh my God, he's figured it out.
It was Dr. Timothy's passion. He worked tirelessly on it. A franchise plan that involved everyone. Each hero got their own movie and TV series. Every hero mathematically equal to the other.
I think this is a really fitting role in this narrative, given that Timmy has pretty often been shown to be concerned with others, even back to how he supported Skylar back in his first major episode with the Lords of the Underworld. And here, in his most recent and final major story in the franchise, his entire goal is to make sure that all of his friends can play together happily. A pretty great motivation for a pretty great character.
Timothy almost worked himself to death trying to come up with it.
Ultimately, Timmy rolled onto the scene and made waves in the show and in the fan base. And while I do think that he's maybe taken a bit of a backseat since his huge splash in Season 4, it's hard to argue that he isn't one of the most popular and consistent characters.
Yeah. Timmy.
Hopefully, Matt and Trey continue to give Timmy more substantial narratives in the show where he can really stand apart and shine. But I think we can all agree that Timmy is great.
God bless us, everyone.
Even in the completely bonkers and varied world of South Park, one character stands out as particularly out there. But at least he always has good advice.
Don't forget to bring a towel. What?
Or at least he always has consistent advice. Towelie was basically introduced as a joke character in Season 5, and while he's mostly remained a joke across the series, there is no question that he is one of the most iconic in the show's history. So don't forget to bring your towel and prepare however else you might want to, and join me as we dive into the highs and lows of the life of Towelie, and then get out and dry ourselves off with a towel.
Yeah, you're a towel.
Towelie was initially conceived because of a dumb running joke on a writer's retreat for Matt and Trey's short-lived series That's My Bush. As you may have considered, it began when somebody yelled, "Don't forget to bring a towel." The concept evolved from there, and when they eventually went to work on it in the show, they added one more angle.
There's also the idea of taking the lamest character possible. In the ways that shows create characters so that they can create shirts and stuff, It was kind of like, well, let's create the lamest character ever.
They really leaned into this idea with a full-on advertisement for Towelie merch right smack dab in the middle of his episode. And honestly, they really called their shot. There is so much Towelie merch available now. Honestly, I kind of want these Towelie Adidas. The funniest thing about Towelie's introduction is how disinterested the boys are in anything that has to do with him. They fully see him as a nuisance, and he's at the center of a story that they do not want to get caught up in. All they want to do is play their new Okama game sphere. It almost feels like a subversion of my favorite South Park formula, when the kids just want to do something kid-focused, but it flies off the rails. This time, though, they are so entirely bored by Towelie's storyline that they basically ignore the details. It's really funny.
Towelie got high and just sort of wandered off.
We don't care. All we want to know is who has our Okama Game Sphere.
And I think because of the boys' disinterest in Towelie's origin, the origin itself is sort of overlooked by the fan base. I know that in rewatching the episode, I forgot how hilariously convoluted Towelie's backstory is, especially now that we're like almost 20 years removed from that storyline. Plus, it was obviously intentionally convoluted, basically a sillier Terminator parody down to the company Tynacorp. But when you unravel the convolution and lay it out chronologically, it's almost even funnier. Towelie is 17 years old in towel years, and he's an RG-400 model smart towel who was created by aliens who were disguising themselves as humans. They were designing smart towels so they could spy on the humans to see how they lived since their own planet was dying, and they basically wanted to replace humans.
Towelie was our greatest success, but then one day, Towelie got high and just sort of wandered off.
To try and combat these aliens, a resistance group that is masquerading as the military intercepts Towelie after he got high and wandered off, and tried to copy his TNA to engineer their own versions of these smart towels to stop the aliens from taking over, which makes sense, does it? But then, as you might expect, Towelie got high and wandered off. That's when he ended up around South Park.
I've been wandering around on my own for the past few weeks, helping people out with towel safety and proper towel use.
Towelie has two primary traits. He can basically be summoned anytime anyone mentions anything that might require a towel, and he will almost always ask you one other question.
You want to get high?
No, we don't want to get high.
Okay. You sure?
The boys ultimately end up helping Towelie escape the clutches of both the resistance group and Tynacorp, even though they really weren't trying to, and Towelie actually saves the boys from falling into lava, despite being tempted by a joint by the resistance's upgraded smart towel model, the RS-401. He even ends up playing Game Sphere with the kids afterwards.
All right, guys, focus. Looks like this is going to be an underwater level.
Don't forget to bring a towel.
You're the worst character ever, Towelie.
I know.
So, though his origin is entirely convoluted and bonkers, it's also mostly inconsequential. After this, Towelie was left to just be a person, despite really only having two major character traits, giving advice on proper towel use and getting absolutely blasted on THC. Unlike other breakout characters like Timmy and Jimmy, Towelie was not used frequently after his introduction. He did have a small appearance in the very next episode when the boys go to Afghanistan.
Don't forget to bring a towel.
No, not Towelie.
And then in season 6, much like Timmy and Jimmy, the boys consider Towelie as a permanent replacement friend for Kenny. He takes part in their bachelor-like competition.
Towelie is a tough choice because even though I can see how always having a towel around could come in handy, he's just always so high.
Towelie actually makes it all the way to the final round as well, but the boys really bumped on that one major issue, basically one of his two character traits.
Towelie's cool, but he gets stoned all the time. You can't really rely on him for anything.
And honestly, the sentiment would basically be the biggest focus of the next part of Towelie's life in some major ways.
You're not a towel, are you?
No.
Though Towelie was seldom used, in this sort of middle era of South Park, they really focused on his struggle to be, well, a person, I guess, even though he's a towel.
You're a towel.
The episode A Million Little Fibers is the first and only episode where Towelie is the only protagonist. Absolutely none of the typical South Park characters are a part of this story, and it's a story about Towelie trying to make ends meet, and how difficult it is to live in the world as a person when you are, in fact, a towel, and also how getting high all the time isn't really helping him. After Towelie gets fired from P.F. Chang's, he's desperate to find a new gig so he can pay rent. Anytime Towelie is struggling, he gets high to come up with a good idea, and then moves forward with that idea.
Hey, yeah, I should become a writer. If I just write a book about my life, I can get it published and then make plenty of money to pay rent.
Honestly, the fact that Towelie wrote the entire memoir so quickly is super impressive, but unfortunately, despite this, publishers do not think there's a market for Towelie's story.
Because they're people, and you're a towel.
You're a towel.
No,
This episode really shows how dependent on weed Towelie is. He gets stoned every single time he needs to come up with an idea, and every single time they backfire in some way.
All my life, I've been a pretty irresponsible person.
Towelie disguises himself as a human named Stephen McTowelie and manages to get his book published to massive success. But he literally has to go on a national book tour and keep up the charade, which of course he can't keep up. So he's discovered and he's called out.
And you are a towel.
Yes, I'm pretty much a towel, Oprah.
Without diving into the plot too much, because it's frankly an insane episode, Oprah, Towelie, and a bunch of other people are basically held hostage by Oprah's vag, and this is where Towelie finally learns the lesson of balance that he needs in his life.
Every time I get high, I come up with ideas that get me in more trouble. I'm not getting high this time.
Towelie slips under the door, unlocks it, and saves all of the hostages. While this episode is obviously a parody of the James Frey Million Little Pieces debacle, I think it says a lot about Towelie as a character. It shows how much he struggles to fit into society as a genetically enhanced smart towel, and also exactly how weed tends to derail his life through his decision making.
I learned that I shouldn't get high to come up with ideas. I should come up with ideas and then get high to reward myself.
He's generally controlled by his addictions, but when he finds a balance, he succeeds. This episode really showcases both of those roads, how he could devolve into a lifestyle that's controlled by his addictions, or how he could rise above it and function within a society that is mostly against him. Unfortunately, things get worse before they get better for Towelie. The next Towelie-focused episode isn't until season 14's Crippled Summer, and after the events of A Million Little Fibers, Towelie completely gives in to his addictions, and more than just weed.
I'm addicted to marijuana and crystal meth and crack.
It's gotten so bad that his friends are attempting to step in and help. Towelie basically spends all of his money on drugs and even takes his friends' money for drugs. They even get him a job at the local summer camp for the handicapped as a towel, but rather than do his job, he keeps hiding in the woods to shoot up heroin. He even vomits all over a poor little handicapped girl. Towelie has truly hit rock bottom at this point. Even worse, before he hit rock bottom, he and his girlfriend had a little washcloth child. Now he can't see his own child because of his vices.
Fuck you! Let me talk to him! Let me talk to him, you bitch!
So it seems like after the events in Chicago, Towelie briefly got his act together, got a girlfriend, had a kid, and then relapsed hard. After a particularly rough period where he loses his job at the camp and then starts huffing computer duster, the boys manage to give Towelie an intervention. And when he comes face to face with his son for the first time in forever, Towelie agrees that it's time to give rehab a try.
I'll go.
You will?
I don't want to hurt washcloths anymore.
Towelie checks into rehab in Palos Verdes, and after his time there, he gets sober, moves in with his girlfriend, and begins to take care of his kid. But for Towelie, sobriety actually wasn't quite the ideal scenario. We don't catch back up with Towelie again until South Park: The Fractured But Whole, and he seems to be doing pretty well. He got a job as a bud tender at the South Park weed dispensary, actually putting his knowledge of cannabis to good use.
Now I'm holding down a job and paying the rent. But I'm also doing good, helping people find the herbal remedies they need.
However, despite doing well on the straight and narrow, his sobriety makes him particularly irritable.
To combat all the modern stresses of a job and taxes and traffic and a wife breathing down my neck about an apartment, Towelie, we got a leak. Why can't you fix it? I'm not a plumber, bitch. I'm a towel, not a fucking plumber.
Towelie gets so irritated that he attacks Eric and the new kid to the point where they have to ignite all of the weed in the store to get Towelie high again, breaking his sobriety. And while this might not look good, let's be real, without the mellowing effects of weed, Towelie attacked children. When he has it under control, Towelie is pretty functional while smoking weed. It was honestly the harder drugs that really sent him over the edge and derailed his entire life. I think that A Million Little Fibers really showcased the balance he needed to strike in his life, and it seems like after breaking his sobriety and getting back on pot, he mostly maintains control pretty effectively. His job at the dispensary was even a really great way for Towelie to use his interest in weed as a means to make a living, and moving forward, we actually see him do this to an even more impressive degree.
Don't forget to bring a towel.
Interestingly, between his introduction in Season 5 and his reintroduction in Season 22, Towelie was really only heavily featured in 4 episodes and a small part of the Fractured But Whole video game. He made other small appearances and non-speaking cameos and occasional one-liners, but he was only ever really a big part of a few stories over 17 years. Then, in Season 22, when Randy moves his family out to a farm to become weed farmers, Towelie is reintroduced. And then, between Season 22's Tegrity Farms up to the latest special, he is heavily featured in like 8 different episodes and has smaller roles in 3 or 4 more. He hasn't had anything that is quite focused on him as heavily as A Million Little Fibers, but he's been in more episodes in the past 5 years than he was in the first 17. And Towelie, for the most part, has become a pretty upstanding guy, somebody with real tegrity. At least he starts out that way. He initially comes in to help test Randy's weed.
Yes, I'm with the state testing board. Is this Tegrity Farms?
So since he broke his sobriety in Fractured But Whole, Towelie manages to get a job that requires him to smoke weed, and a good one. You would assume that he's really figured it out and is taking care of his family. However, we don't actually hear about Rebecca or Washcloth ever again after Fractured But Whole, and he starts to spend most of his time at Tegrity Farms.
If you're gonna fight for your integrity, don't forget to bring a towel.
Vape on this, bitch!
As his farm grows, Randy hires Towelie on full time. He basically becomes his partner and is repeatedly shown to have some genuine motivation and business acumen. While previously you might expect Towelie to just be high all the time, especially when hanging out on a weed farm, this isn't the case. He's even seen reading literature on agricultural farming. And he shows over and over that he has great business ideas, like when they realize how stiff the competition for weed is when people come out to the farming areas.
What if we use e-scooters to get the weed directly to the customers?
Or when Randy wants everyone to brainstorm ways to increase profits after they'd plateaued.
It's the swag. All those stems and seeds, they just go to waste, man.
Go on.
You can sell that crap as mulch to a hardware company.
But Towelie's time at Tegrity Farms is also pretty tumultuous, but for once it's not because of Towelie's own actions. As Randy starts to lose his own integrity and does more and more immoral things to get ahead in his business, he loses Towelie's trust.
Weed isn't supposed to be some money-grubbing business model. It's a gift from God.
And this was even before Randy bombed the home growers to keep his business going. Horrendous stuff. It was also before he started working directly with the Chinese government. However, Randy eventually apologizes to Towelie, and I think that this unfortunately dragged Towelie down a bit morally. Where he stood firm in his beliefs previously, he really starts to let Randy affect what he's willing to do for the business after this. Some things start out reasonably, like when they open up Tegrity Burger and use the weed byproducts to create their own vegan burger replacement. But after a rancher angrily leaves all his cows for Randy to take care of, he and Towelie literally murder all of the cows so that they don't eat all of the weed. All of these horrible things that Randy and Towelie do come back to haunt them in the Tegrity Farms Halloween special when they hallucinate on some particularly potent stuff, but it still doesn't really stop them. They even start selling weed that is caked in cocaine to South Park residents without telling them that it's caked in cocaine. He also helps Randy absolutely abuse the amount of water they're allotted during the streaming wars. To me, it seems like Towelie had finally gotten his life together after going to rehab and realizing that he can still be a productive member of society while smoking weed, as long as he doesn't give in to any of his more dangerous addictions. But unfortunately, Randy's own fall from grace and continual loss of integrity began dragging Towelie down with him. Towelie isn't anywhere close to where he was when he hit rock bottom and needed an intervention, of course, but the most recent times we've seen Towelie, he's mostly just smoking and selling weed. No mention of his family, fewer and fewer instances of his business ambitions, and almost no instances of him calling Randy out when he really deserves it. But despite his limited number of appearances, Towelie is a character who has gone through a lot. He's a genetically engineered super towel who was forced to live in society like a person. He's lied his way to massive success, struggled deeply and given into addictions, overcome those struggles, and even become a mildly successful business towel. I'd love to see Towelie get a more substantial storyline again sometime soon. However, for now,
I have no idea what's going on.
Obviously, shipping is a major part of just about every fandom that exists, especially these days, but I think you'd be hard-pressed to find a ship that affected its show's narrative more than Tweak X Craig in South Park. Okay, don't quote me on that, I'm not too invested in the world of shipping, but what I do know is that after relative obscurity in the fandom at large, Matt Stone and Trey Parker caught wind of the passion fans had for the Creek ship, as it was called. And would you believe it? They canonized it. And not just canonized, they managed to take this unlikely fandom pairing and develop it into genuinely one of the sweetest relationships South Park has ever seen. So today, let's not only talk about the history of Tweek and Craig, but why it's such a great and beloved relationship in South Park. South Park has been on for nearly 25 years, so as you might expect, there have been tons of popular ships in the fandom over the years. In fact, one of the first videos I ever made for my channel was about Kaiman, the pairing of Kyle and Cartman. This was back when I showed my face in my videos. I actually made that video twice, because it eventually got blocked by Viacom. Please don't block this video, Viacom. But there have been plenty of other ships as well, including Stan x Kyle, and of course, Tweek x Craig. Now, the fandom surrounding Tweek x Craig seems to stem from the Season 3 episode Tweek vs. Craig, which was really the first time the characters were paired in any way. The episode basically revolves around Stan, Kyle, and Cartman disagreeing over who the bigger troublemaker is, Craig or Tweek. To come up with an answer, they basically decide to manipulate the two kids into fighting each other to see who would win. Honestly, early on, the boys were kind of assholes. They did a lot of mean shit like this. The episode didn't focus all that much on Tweek or Craig as characters. It was much more about how they were manipulated into fighting. The two have a huge blowout fight, and then the episode ends with Tweek and Craig fighting again at the hospital where they're recovering from their injuries from the first fight. And though the episode didn't give us all that much development for the pair as actual characters, it did effectively set them up as rivals, even if we never really saw that rivalry play out again after this episode. But this is seemingly what would fuel the shipping fandom's obsession with Tweek and Craig. During the production of the second South Park game, South Park: The Fractured But Whole, a producer on the project named Jason Schroeder was searching the internet for visual references for certain characters, and this was when he discovered a subculture of the fandom who would create artwork of Tweek and Craig in intimate and romantic poses. Jason decided to show this to Matt and Trey allegedly said, "We'll make a show about it." So 16 years after Tweek vs. Craig, the South Park fandom's passion for the characters actually inspired Matt and Trey to make an episode, which is pretty damn cool. The art generally took the form of yaoi, which is a Japanese style of art that features relationships between male characters. So even more interestingly, leading up to the episode, South Park Studios put out a request for fans of South Park to submit their own yaoi of Tweek and Craig to be featured in the episode. The episode did a great job explaining yaoi and showcasing the art itself.
The art tries to show that all love is magical, like in Lisa Akimoto's piece, Tweek and Craig Forbidden Love.
But they were also able to take this phenomenon and really effectively reverse engineer an emotional and affecting story out of it. Since this type of fan art didn't really have any basis in the canon of South Park, as Tweek and Craig weren't shown to be together or have any interest in boys, they gave both of them a very understandable reaction to the art being showcased.
Dude, what the fuck?
But even though the pair of them were really uncomfortable with the situation, somehow the entire town of South Park was just inspired by their story.
Our town has only had a Whole Foods for 3 weeks and we already have our first gay kids. So cool.
There's a really beautiful montage set to the song The Book of Love, and it just shows the entire town embracing the love Tweek and Craig show for each other in this yaoi artwork. And it's kind of amazing, as though everyone saw something pure and magical in the relationship, even though the relationship didn't actually exist, perfectly mirroring the creation of the art in the first place. Sometimes people are just inspired. The inspiration didn't need to be rooted in the reality of the show's canon. People were just inspired to create based on this hypothetical couple, despite the fact that the couple did not exist within the show itself. But because the town and the students embraced Tweek and Craig so thoroughly with open arms, this pushed the two boys into this incredibly stressful and difficult situation. Tweek is already a really paranoid character, so this was something that was really difficult for him to cope with, and it actually led to the two of them fighting again, sort of a callback to their origins. But this stressful situation that they found themselves in is actually the thing that would bring them together in a pretty cool and unexpected way. Craig comes up with a plan that the two of them need to actually embrace being a couple and then publicly break up so that people will stop bothering them about it. Tweek is very stressed out by the pressure of that situation, acting in front of the entire school. That's really tough for him, but Craig actually inspires Tweek.
Like acting? Oh man, that is way too much pressure! You can do it, Tweek! You're capable of more than you think.
And sure enough, when the pair of them stage the breakup, Tweek is a natural. He absolutely sells the breakup with his acting, but he sells it too well. He makes Craig look like the bad guy in the breakup.
I was totally wrong about you. I opened myself up and let you in. But you've got spikes, man. You've got spikes.
So as the Craig and Tweek relationship falls apart, so does the town of South Park. Literally everyone in town is hurt by it. And this leads to another really amazing montage set to Say Something by Great Big World. Say something, I'm giving up on you. I'll be the one if you want me to. Anywhere I would have followed you. Say something, I'm giving up on you. I just love how invested the entire town was in this. Like, it made them really believe in love. And when it didn't work out, their collective hearts were broken all at once. And Tweek quickly finds that their solution didn't bring him the relief or closure that he needed, filling him with regret over how he treated Craig. This is one of my favorite scenes. Craig truly believed in Tweek when all the odds were against him.
You made me believe in myself in a way I never have before. I didn't think I had any of that in me, but you were right. I can do more than I think.
And that really meant something to Tweek. So Tweek, now seeing Craig in pain, wants to return the favor.
You changed something in me, and I want to fix whatever's hurting you now.
And while it takes a bit for Craig to come around, after a heart-to-heart with his father, and in spite of his initial discomfort, he decides to give it a try. At first, it seems like it's just for the sake of the town, but before long, Tweek and Craig are truly enjoying each other's company. It's really sweet. Like, how can you not watch this and have your heart filled? And they didn't decide to just leave it there either. The two are referred to as a couple continually after Tweek x Craig, and then in season 21 we get another Tweek and Craig focused episode that really develops their relationship further. In the episode Put It Down, Tweek is stressing about how a certain former president of the United States was handling a volatile relationship with North Korea.
North Korea is going to bomb us! We are all dead!
Tweek is obviously a character that lives up to his name, and over the course of the episode, Craig goes to great lengths to try and calm Tweek down. It's really sweet, he really cares about him.
I can't settle down, we're all gonna die!
We're not all gonna die. You're overreacting. Everything's fine, okay?
Tweek makes cupcakes for Kim Jong-un, hoping it will ease the tensions, and at first, it actually does, until the president tweets that it was probably just a prank Tweek was playing, which fully puts Tweek on the North Korean radar. And this, as you would expect, sends Tweek spiraling even further. And the entire time, Craig is trying to deal with Tweek's anxiety by refocusing his energy or convincing him that logically he has nothing to worry about.
You haven't been dealing with it! You've been trying to make it go away because my emotions are freaking you out!
He cares about Tweek and he wants to help, but he isn't letting him work through his anxiety. He tries to divert it, which leads to a big fight.
Stop preaching facts to me! It's not what I need!
Well, I'm sorry that I'm actually in control of my goddamn emotions, you baby!
And luckily for Craig, through a conflict between Cartman and Heidi, he realizes what it is that Tweek actually needs. He needs support. He needs his loved ones to be there for him.
People need help sorting out their emotions sometimes. And the best thing isn't always quick answers, but just being there.
This is another one of my favorite scenes, as Craig just allows Tweek the space he needs to talk through his own fears and anxieties. He doesn't offer solutions or try to distract him or try to fix the problems. He just supports him as he talks through his own emotions.
Jesus, it's like there's no solution to any of this. What are you gonna do? What can you do?
Maybe I have to find a way to feel a little in charge of me again.
I really like it when they just smile at each other here. The beginning and end of the episodes are a really nice mirror of each other too, showcasing the development Tweek and Craig have gone through. The opening had Tweek performing his stressed out, panicky song all by himself, handling his anxieties alone. But at the end of the episode, Craig performs with him, supporting him through his fears. I think one of the reasons that Tweek and Craig work so well is that the relationship is taken seriously. Yeah, it began in kind of a silly way through the yaoi and shipping culture, but the relationship itself, especially in Put It Down, is treated like any other well-developed relationship you might find on TV. They aren't stereotypes, they didn't change the characters significantly when they revealed that they were gay, and they still focus on the traits that these characters have always been known for. It's portrayed realistically. They aren't idealized. They have their own struggles and fears and anxieties that they have to work through. In fact, this kind of representation absolutely blows so much other mainstream media out of the water. It's hard to imagine we'll ever see a gay couple this thoroughly normalized in, say, a Marvel or Star Wars movie. There's actually a really great video about this by a channel called Prideberry. I highly recommend it. I'll link it in the description. Of course, South Park is not a perfect show when it comes to representation. There is plenty that they can and should do better, especially in regards to the trans community. But when it comes to Tweek and Craig, they really nailed it. They took a crack ship, as they call it, canonized it, and then legitimized it. I actually think as far as the kids in South Park go, this might be the best and healthiest relationship we've ever seen. Not that there's that much competition there, but still, it's nice. So here's to Tweek and Craig, one of the most wholesome developments in all 25 years of South Park.
I hope you know when you are down that you turned my life around. Just like the quote from Shakespeare said, I'm your Tweek, and you're my Craig.